Welcome to This Explainer. You know, whenever we see a generational talent just completely take over the global stage, it's so tempting to call it magic, right? We see this acceleration that literally seems to bend physics, or composure that defies all logic, and we just assume, wow, they were touched by destiny. But today, we're going to completely shatter that illusion.
Okay, let's dive into this. As the author Jan Mauro puts it in our source material, nothing about the rise of the boy from Bondy was magic. It was built. So we're not looking at some happy accident here. We're looking at a highly calculated, deliberate construction of a global sporting icon.
You see, we all kind of love the myth, don't we? The myth tells us that talent just drops from the sky at random. And let's be honest, it's a super comforting fairy tale because it demands absolutely nothing of us. But the gritty reality? The reality is that talent is manufactured by dense, high-stakes environments. It's forged through daily, relentless discipline and really smart choices made over decades.
So to figure out how this actually works, here's the blueprint for our explainer today. We're going to deconstruct the four main load-bearing walls that built this generational talent. First, building the launch pad. Then, a multidimensional engine. Third, mastering high pressure. And finally, the weight of a symbol. Let's get right into it.
Part 1. Building the launch pad. The architecture of early talent.
To really understand this, we have to step away from the flashing cameras and drop right into a street in Bondy. It's a working-class suburb on the edge of Paris, and this brilliantly illustrates how a place like Saint-Saint-Denis isn't just a backdrop, it's practically a natural laboratory for producing greatness. The ingredients are just perfectly balanced. First, you've got density, a really high population playing incredibly tough street games. Then, necessity. This dramatically concentrates desire simply because there are very limited alternate routes to success. Finally, the national machine. This funnels all that raw talent into a proven scouting pipeline, like Clairefontaine. Basically, scarcity and relentless competition focus effort in a way that abundance just dilutes.
But, the environment is only half the launch pad. The other half is the family. And a family system in this context isn't just about having a loving home. It operates like a small, highly competent organization that's optimizing for a 15-year career arc, rather than just cashing in on immediate short-term payouts. His parents, a local football coach and a former pro handball player, knew the sports industry inside and out. They provided what experts call high challenge paired with high safety. They protected him from early exploitation, kept him grounded and as ordinary as possible for as long as they could, and absolutely prioritized long-term development over a quick, flashy buck.
All right, moving on to part 2, a multidimensional engine, scaling under pressure.
Shifting our focus over to his physical mechanics, it is so incredibly tempting to just look at his blistering speed and call it a day. But speed alone, that's a blunt instrument. His real engine is this deeply interconnected stack of skills. It starts with explosive speed, sure, but that speed is entirely governed by a high-level football intelligence that knows exactly when to deploy it. Then, add in technical execution that literally doesn't falter even at an absolute full sprint, plus durability under pressure. Suddenly these skills are multiplying each other. It's exactly why his talent didn't just plateau, it scaled up as things got harder.
So, what does this mean for us? Well, the lesson here is pretty clear. Do not just rely on your one obvious gift. You absolutely have to build a supporting stack around it. To survive at the very highest levels of whatever field you're in, you must constantly reinvent yourself and add new dimensions to your game long before your competitors force you to do it.
Which brings us to part 3, mastering high pressure, the ascent and the fall. Let's take a look at how this highly tuned engine was stress-tested on the world's absolute biggest stages. His timeline is frankly staggering. A professional debut just before turning 17, dominating the Champions League semifinals the very next season, becoming a World Cup champion at just 19. Now, most people would completely shrink under that kind of exponential pressure, but his temperament was just different. He didn't shrink, he expanded.
Just think about the number 4 for a second. In the 2018 World Cup against Argentina, it took him just 4 minutes to score twice and completely change how the entire world saw him. And what's really interesting about this is that it proved his nervous system had successfully mastered fear. He simply did not let the pressure get a vote in what his body actually did on the pitch.
But then, we arrive at another number, 3. Fast forward to the 2022 World Cup final. In a match where his team was trailing and struggling mightily, he stepped up and scored an unprecedented 3 goals.
A hat trick on the biggest stage imaginable, literally dragging his team back from the absolute brink of defeat. But ultimately, France lost on penalties. It became the hat trick that won nothing. And this really de-escalates the stakes and reveals the brutal, unavoidable reality of sport, and honestly, of life itself. You can do absolutely everything perfectly. You can deliver a transcendent, historic performance, and it still doesn't guarantee you the outcome you deserve. Sometimes the result is just completely out of your control. Which brings us to a really profound psychological lesson. How do you actually survive a devastating loss like that? Well, you separate your performance from the outcome, and then you separate the outcome from your self-worth. He treated his massive 2018 triumph and his heartbreaking 2022 disaster the exact same way, as simple data points. Real resilience isn't about just bouncing back instantly with a smile. Actually, it's about genuinely carrying the wound, feeling that hurt, and refusing to let it stop you from moving forward. Now for part 4, the weight of a symbol, beyond the pitch. We really need to talk about the unseen, incredibly heavy burdens that come with this kind of global superstardom. Seriously, what happens when a 19-year-old suddenly becomes a national symbol? Because of his background and his exceptional talent, the boy from Bondy became a screen onto which an entire nation projected its complex arguments about identity, immigration, and integration. He was enlisted into intense political conversations that he never even asked to be a part of. So he had to navigate these immense, distorting forces entirely off the pitch. Becoming the most expensive teenager in history brought on just suffocating financial expectations. He had to balance a strictly neutral focus on sport, all while knowing his image was being used by all sides of national identity politics. He assumed the official national team captaincy, managed a huge global commercial brand, you name it. Yet through all this incredible noise, the long-arc discipline that his family instilled in him held remarkably firm. Here is the critical takeaway if you ever find yourself experiencing high levels of visibility or success. The craft itself is rarely what fails first. So often, highly gifted people are undone by the noise, the inflated expectations, and the massive apparatus of their own success. You have to treat managing that surrounding noise just as seriously as you treat practicing your core talent.
Finally, part 5, the final whistle, translating greatness.
Let's tie all of these structural threads together. So the crucial point is this: greatness isn't just some random magic. It requires a highly structured launchpad to give a gifted person direction. It requires a multi-dimensional engine so that talent can actually scale and adapt. True resilience relies on a pressure-tested temperament. And longevity, that demands the maturity to manage the immense weight of visibility. Which leaves us with a final, provocative question for you to ponder today. We are all going to face moments where we give our absolute best, and it just isn't enough to secure the win. If unrewarded excellence struck you today, how strong is your launchpad to help you carry that wound forward? Let's move beyond just hoping for magic and start actually building our own machinery for success. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.